Hey, storyteller. What kind of writer are you? Do you need to plan every aspect of your story in advance? Or do you just fly by the seat of your pants and discover what happens next as you go? Is one way better than the other? Does it even matter how you write as long as the story is good? Not knowing or examining the answers to some of these questions can significantly hinder or even derail your success as a writer. How, you may ask? Welcome to this week's writer coaching session, in which you'll find out. I'm Bridget from B Squared Writer Coaching, an author, editor, and your story coach, here to help you make your story powerful, polished, and publishable. First, I have a gift for you just for visiting my channel. My free workshop, 6 Essential Elements of a Powerful Story. No matter what kind of writer you are or what your writing process looks like, you probably have one main goal in mind for your story: to move readers with maximum emotional impact. This 25-minute video workshop walks you through how to ramp up your plot, characters, conflict, setting, and theme, plus how to write all this in a way that makes the reader feel like they're experiencing the story with your characters. To access it, click the link in the description or visit b2writercoaching.com/workshop. That's the letter B, the number 2, writercoaching.com/workshop. And be sure to stick around until the end of this video so you won't miss this week's Power Up, a super practical action step you can take right now in the story you're working on. Why is it important to know what kind of writer you are or which writing process works best for you? Well, here are a few reasons. Knowing your process can make starting a story or the writing as a whole easier and more efficient. It helps you not stress over how others do it, because you know your way and what works best for you. And the more you understand your own process, the better you are equipped to plug the appropriate techniques, story structures, and other things you might learn about the writing craft into the parts of the process where they will help you the most. For example, if you're plotting, then this would be during the planning stage. If you're a discovery writer, it might be during the revision stage, or you may plug certain parts in along the way if you're a hybrid writer. Speaking of that, we're going to examine 3 different kinds of writing processes. I do want to make a note here that your writing process may change over time as you develop as a writer, and it also can vary some from book to book or project to project. Most people do fall somewhere on a sliding scale between the first 2 categories we're going to look at, and that sort of creates that third category. We're going to look at plotters, pantsers, and hybrid writers. First, what is a plotter? Here are a few traits of plotters and how the process works for them. Plotters plan at least part of the story before beginning to write. They may use a detailed scene or chapter outline, list of just major events that happen in the story, a mind map, narrative summaries of various aspects, a beat sheet, which is a list of the major story beats or events in the story and what happens for each, a breakdown of the main character's arc, or a random list of things they want to include. Some amount of plotting takes place before any writing begins. Keep in mind that people on the far extreme of the sliding scale as plotters may plot everything in the story. They may plan out their setting, the character arcs in full, every step of the journey toward transformation or refusal of transformation. The story beats, some plotters may plan everything down to the chapters and the scenes within those chapters before ever writing a word. This can be rather difficult and time-consuming. It's almost like writing the story before writing the story. A person who plots in this much detail is almost creating a first draft before they start the writing process, and that's perfectly fine. But there are many levels to what a plotter might do and how much plotting happens before the writing begins. There are several advantages to being a plotter. It's easier to ensure that the story as a whole will work structurally and contain a complete plot and character arc. You'll probably have less to do in revision because you've already planned out the story and made it cohesive and complete before you ever wrote it. There's less risk of having to throw away scenes or entire sections that you've written. And plotting helps you know what happens next, so you can foreshadow that earlier in the story and write toward a goal. It makes it easier to know what you'll write today because once you sit down to write, you can look at your plot outline or whatever plot structure you use and choose one of the things that you've outlined. There's less chance of the story getting off track or meandering. It's easier to incorporate and keep track of subplots, multiple viewpoints with their own arcs, and more complex plot structures. For example, the inclusion of flash forwards and flashbacks, or if you're using a nonlinear plot structure. It's easier to make sure you're delivering good progress and a satisfying payoff or climax and resolution for the promises you've made early in the story. There are also some disadvantages to plotting. This can diminish the initial excitement over a new story by using it up in the outlining phase before you start writing. It's that shiny object syndrome thing where we get so excited about a new story idea and we can't wait to write it. If you plot in great detail, the excitement might wane a little bit even before you start the actual writing process. It can make you feel constrained to what you've written in the outline. One of my biggest tips for plotters is to be flexible. Just because you've written something in your outline or your plot structure does not mean you have to do it. Give yourself some leeway for the story to change as you write it. Plotting can become a time sink if you outline in too much detail without getting into the writing. I actually know someone who plotted for several years before ever starting the writing process. It can be difficult to create organic, lifelike characters or to know what they'll do or decide next based on their personality if you haven't written anything from their point of view yet, and you're just sticking to the outline and haven't gotten into the writing. You might plot a character's action or decision one way, but when you start writing them, you'll discover this character actually wouldn't do that. How do you know if you might be a plotter? You might be a plotter if you feel stuck when you don't know what you're writing toward or what comes next, or how something will end, like the scene or the story as a whole. This is true for me. I needed to know how a story ended so I knew what to write toward. I also like having an idea of what scene comes next for a particular character so I know how to end the current scene or which direction to take it. This also might be you if the weight of an entire unwritten story looming over you feels overwhelming, and so you may want to plot the story in parts to diminish that overwhelmed feeling. You might be a plotter if you really like checking things off a list. Again, that's me. If you like having a plan and a destination before writing, and this might be you if knowing everything you can about the setting, the characters, and the story events fuels your creativity. Are you finding this helpful so far? If so, consider clicking the like button so YouTube will show this video to more writers like you. Now, what do I mean by a pantser when I say you could be a plotter or a pantser? A pantser is a term we use in the writing industry for a person who flies by the seat of their pants, or as I like to call them, a discovery writer. They discover the story while they're writing it, not before. Here are some traits and how the writing process works for a discovery writer. This writer just starts writing with nothing but an idea for a character, cool setting detail, or interesting plot event. Pantsers often have no idea how the story will end or even what the next scene will include. This writer may use some of the plotting methods mentioned earlier during the revision process to fix the structure or add structure to the story. Here are some advantages of being a discovery writer. You have the freedom to just be creative and see where the story and characters will take you. Discovery writers also can just start writing as soon as an idea forms. There are disadvantages, though. You'll likely have more to do during the revision process because parts of the story might not work, or you might have to refine the plot and make connections that you didn't make during the discovery writing process. You may need to throw away entire scenes or sections that don't fit anymore. The plot can change on you any moment when you're discovery writing, so something you wrote earlier might not even work. You'll probably have to do more rewriting, scrapping entire scenes, or completely rewriting others. The story may wander or meander without a satisfying conclusion. You may lose track of subplots or complete plot threads. You may end up devoting too much space to a less important thread in the story, or character transformations may not work or be sufficiently supported by other events in the story. So in the revision process, if you discover that your character's transformation involves overcoming a fear, but you didn't foreshadow that fear or show the character dealing with it earlier in the story, you'll have to go back in and add those things. It can be difficult to foreshadow when you don't know what will happen later. Just a quick note on foreshadowing. Plotters and discovery writers alike will often have to go back and insert foreshadowing during the revision process because that is something we can't always know we need up front. Even if we plot the story, we might not necessarily know some of the aspects that will happen. So this can be true for either. How do you know if you're a discovery writer or a pantser? This could be you if you enjoy revision, like taking a stone that is rough hewn and forming it into a detailed sculpture. An outline makes you feel constrained or even claustrophobic. This might be you if plotting sucks the joy out of writing a new story. And you may be a discovery writer if you can't generate plot or character ideas without writing a scene first. You might be thinking, well, yeah, but I have traits of both of these. Sometimes I like to plot pieces of it, and then I like to discovery write within that. So, which am I? You're probably a hybrid writer. In fact, most of us are. I'm definitely a hybrid writer, but I sort of lean a little more heavily toward the plotting side of things. Let's look at how a hybrid writer's process might work. This type of writer might plot parts or certain aspects, then write, then add to the plot. Or they may plot only a little, then discovery write the rest of the story. For example, you might plot the major story beats and discovery write everything in between. Or you might plot your story's inciting incident and climax, and then discovery write the rest. You may plan the plot and discovery write the characters. Best-selling author Brandon Sanderson talks about this being his method. He has a pretty detailed outlining process for his plot, but as far as characters go, he might have a vague idea of their motivations and things like that at the beginning, but he really just has to write scenes from their perspective in order to learn who they are, and so he'll fill that part in on his outline as he writes. You may start with a basic plot or character arc, then discovery write until you get stuck, then plot to get unstuck and write some more. What I will often do when I have a brand new story idea is I'll take notes on what is that idea. Is it an interesting character or a strange setting or a cool plot event or maybe a combination of some of those three? I'll write notes and just get it out of my head and onto paper. Then I'll start making a vague list of random events that I think might need to be in the story. This could be 3 to 5 events, maybe more. They're not in any particular order unless I know the order up front. And then I may start writing scenes from the main character's perspective or parts of some of those events that I wrote in the list. After writing a scene or two, I may stop and try to plot more in depth. I don't always use story beats, though I have started trying to do so to figure out what the inciting incident is, the turning point, the character's all is lost moment, things like that. For more on the 7 most essential story beats, you can check out this video linked above, and I'll also link it in the description. Hybrid writers have many different ways that they may approach this process. Here are the advantages to being a hybrid writer. You get the best of both worlds. Plot only what you need to know, be creative and free within the framework, then plot more as you need it. It gives you the ability to do as much or little of each type as suits you best. You have more flexibility within the plot framework than you do if you're just a strict plotter. It keeps the story on track to minimize throwaway scenes and allows for more organic character growth. The disadvantages, well, it may be hard at first to decide how much or what parts to plan and what to discovery write. That's really the only disadvantage I can think of for this type of writing process. You may not know how much you want or need to plot ahead of time, so you just kind of have to wing it. How do you know if you're a hybrid writer? Well, actually, this is most writers. I'd say probably about 90% of writers fall along the spectrum closer to one end or the other. But if you've tried one or both of these, plotting and discovery writing, and they don't work well for you, this is probably an indication that you're a hybrid writer. Or if you've tried one method and want to move into trying the other, this is usually how it works. You think you're a discovery writer, but you've run into some issues and you're really frustrated with the revision process. So for your next story, you want to try plotting. You may actually want to try being a hybrid writer first and moving toward the plotting end of the spectrum because it's an easier transition than just going full on plotter after discovery writing. There's a reason that you started as a discovery writer, and your creativity might suffer if you try to plot the entire story before writing any of it. I've known several writers who start out as discovery writers and finds that they need to plot some for their next story because it was hard to keep track of everything or figure out what needs to happen. One of my dearest writer friends is going through that now, and he's absolutely loving plotting his story. But he didn't plot the ending. He just plotted what he could figure out and used some story structure techniques to help him decide what comes next. Maybe he plotted a third of the book and then started writing it, and then plotted another section of it and wrote some more. So he's using a combination of the two. It works very well. And just as a quick reminder, if you haven't done so yet, grab your link to my free workshop, The 6 Essential Elements of a Powerful Story. Remember, just click the link in the description or visit b2writercoaching.com/workshop. Now for today's power up. Use the information in this video to figure out what process fits you best. Are you a plotter, a discovery writer, somewhere in between? If you are more of a hybrid writer and you know it, which parts do you plot and which parts do you write as you go? Next, I have a challenge for you. Whichever method you normally use, especially if you lean more heavily in one direction or the other, with a new story, even a really brief one, try one of the other methods. If you lean more heavily toward the plotter end, try discovery writing something. No plotting at all. If you are a discovery writer, try plotting a story and see what happens. This is a great exercise for getting you outside your comfort zone and seeing whether there are other methods that you might find useful, things you haven't tried before. Or you may want to use parts of some methods. You may want to just use the random list of events as a form of plotting if you're normally a discovery writer. You might find a mind map useful. It's just great to expand our creativity by trying something new. This challenge can be especially useful if you find yourself getting stuck in the story you're writing. And if you are feeling stuck or experiencing writer's block, check out these two videos and let's power up your storytelling.